I hope we're not too crowded in this room, but we thought this was a little more comfortable than the boardroom. So thank you for being here this evening. I'm Shirley O'Brien. I am the Chief of Student Services, and we want to thank you for serving on the Redistricting Advisory Committee. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you taking your time away from your families to be here with us tonight. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Reese to say a few words.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And since we're recording I should be talking over here. Since we are recording, that's why I'm here. Usually I'd like to be in front of the room here and kind of, walking around. But I'll echo what Shirley or Ms. O'Brien, really appreciate your time and commitment to this process, and this very, very important process of redistricting and ensuring that we have equitable and a transparent process of ensuring that all of our kiddos have an equitable opportunity to their education. And as you'll see the data, you're going to be getting a lot of information, a lot of data. But at the end of the day, it's going to be important information for you to have to ensure that we are giving the best recommendation possible for the board to consider. And Ms. O'Brien will get a little bit more into that. The other piece is going to be, and I talked about a fair and transparent process. So part of that, we're recording. We'll be posting the recording so that you can also go back and review and some of those, pieces that you'll a lot of times you leave here and said, I should have asked this, or I didn't quite understand this, or what did they say here? You'll be able to have that opportunity. But before moving forward, I also want to recognize, first of all, Board President Teresa Tenorio, who is here joining us today and is part of our committee as well, and thank her for her support and advocacy for our children. And Mr. Patrick Nolan, who is our other board member representative, could not join us today due to some certain circumstances. He will be here for our next meeting. Also, our kiddos that are here. I was talking to some of our students and appreciate their time and letting them know that their voice is very, very important in this process as well as everyone else's. And as I look across the room and who's represented here, and you'll get this information, more specifics, but the parents, our community, our staff, et cetera, that are here to ensure that we are making the best decision and ensuring again that we have an equitable opportunities for our students across the district. But with that said, again, thank you so much. We're here to support. That's the other piece I wanted to mention. We are here, and the staff, if you could raise your hand, our district staff that is here, that is part of this process, I want to thank them also for their time and their commitment to this as well. So, and what I mean by we're here to support, again, lots of information. There's going to be a lot to consider. We are here when you have any additional questions, you need any clarity on anything, that's where we're here for that as well. So, again, thank you so much. I'll turn the time over to Ms. O'Brien now, and then we'll move forward with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Reese.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate you being here. All right, so next I want to introduce our consultant and facilitator, Ms. Colleen Martinez from Visions and Planning. I'm going to turn it over to her just to say a little bit about herself and her company.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know tonight is opening night of NFL football, so I know you're giving up a whole lot just to be here. Any Chief fans out there? Yes. Raven fans? Nope. Well, we're here tonight. We're going to be talking about the redistricting, but my name's Colleen Martinez, as Ms. O'Brien's already mentioned. I'm with Visions in Planning. We specialize in educational facility planning. We do this type of work all the time across the state. We've worked with more than a third of the districts in New Mexico. We've been around, we're out of Albuquerque, but we've been around now going on our 14th year. I personally have been doing this for over 30 years. So we get into district demographics, which are a little bit different. We look at enrollment, we look at school capacities, we look at facility conditions, we look at a lot of different things as part of this. And so we're happy here to be working with the district. We've had a a relationship with the district for about 4 years now, so we're very familiar with everything that's been going on, from everything that's happened at Columbia to Mayfield to now really working with the district on finally implementing some of these zone changes that are needed, and also looking at, overall district master plan in terms of what facilities need to be addressed as part of that for the future. So I'll let Ms. O'Brien take it.
Thank you, Colleen. All right, so before we get started, just a couple housekeeping things. Number one, we are recording all of our meetings that we have. And full transparency, we want the public to be able to access this information, you to go back and access it. So we will be creating a redistricting webpage on our website where this information will be housed. Restrooms are right out this door, so if anybody needs to use the facilities, right out this door here. Please help yourself to snacks. I know it's dinner time. Maybe you'll feel like you're watching football if those of you are missing it, having a little popcorn. And then each of you were given a folder when you signed in. Some are yellow, some are blue. These folders, we do want you to bring every meeting because we do have some policies and regulations that we'll be referring to. We have the New Mexico Activities Association information in there, as well as some New Mexico state statutes that we'll be referring to. So as I said, if you'll please keep those handy and bring them to each meeting, we would appreciate it. Also, we know you are going to have a lot of questions this evening. I'm going to be sharing some information with you. Colleen has a lot of information as well to share. Dr. Wendy is also going to be doing a presentation. And in fact, let me stop right there. Dr. Wendy, I forgot to introduce you. Please let me, please stand up so we can introduce Dr. Wendy Miller Tomlinson. She is Deputy Superintendent of Teaching, Learning, and Research. Did I miss anything, Wendy? Okay, perfect. Okay. So back to questions. We know you will have a lot of questions along the way. We've put some Post-it notes and pens at your tables. We'd like to hold off on answering any questions until the very end of our presentations this evening. We know questions, that time for you to ask your questions is very important. If we happen to run out of time and we don't get to all the questions, I've put a poster back there that you can put your question on, and we will get back to it when we meet again in October. But like I said, if you'll please just jot them down and hold off till the very end, we'll work some time in to do that then. I think that is all I had. Oh, before I get into my piece of the presentation, I do want to take just a minute for you all to go around, just say your name, what capacity you're here in, whether you're a parent, a student, administrator, whatever your position is, just so we can all get a feel for who's with us tonight. And I'm going to start right here with Bobby.
Bobby Campos, Assistant Athletic Director for Las Cruces Public Schools.
Michelle Ranga, Athletic Director for Las Cruces Public Schools.
Natalie Green, parent. Michelle Valdez, Principal at Columbia Elementary School. Sochi Reyes for Student Advisory Council.
Ava Gonzalez from Las Cruces High School.
And if you will tell us what campus or feeder pattern, if you don't know the feeder pattern, that's okay, but what campus you're representing, that would be helpful too. Dr. Olke?
Angela Bean from Special Characters and Special Education.
Ed Ellison, Executive Director of Information Operations of Las Cruces Public Schools.
Sharon Garcia, teacher at Tampa Elementary.
Eric Cross, Principal at Mayfield High School.
Edwanda Williams, Executive Director of Operations.
Veronica Escapita, I'm a parent with Vista Middle School, Mayfield Feeder District.
Cullen Maher, parent with Mayfield Feeder.
Manny Guardiola, parent, Las Cruces High School.
Tyson Foster, senior at Mayfield High School.
Laura Peck, parent at Oregon Mountain.
Ethan Peck, senior at Oregon Mountain.
Karen Knight, Principal of Sonoma Elementary.
Roberto Lozano's Chief of Educational Equity and Support Programs.
Susana Cabral from Oregon Mountain.
Zoe Rodriguez, a senior at Mayfield High School.
Ella Clemens, a junior at Mayfield.
Alexa Edmondson, junior from Rosemont.
Aaliyah Solis, a student at Centennial High School.
from Cincinnati.
Phoebe Yarwood, senior at Centennial High School.
Monty Wamo, counselor at Centennial High School.
Quincy Bailey, I'm a senior at Centennial High School.
Tara Benz, I'm a parent at Zia Middle School.
Lana Pierce, Oregon Mountain High School.
Kelly Jamison, Director of Communication here at Las Cruces Public Schools.
Jessica Doak, I'm parent at Watamba Elementary.
Maya Gaitan from Las Cruces High School.
Elias Lysis, senior at Las Cruces High School.
I'm Noah Muria. I'm a teacher at Columbia Elementary, which is from Mayfield feeder pattern, and I'm also here with NEA.
Natalia Piero, a teacher at Mesa Middle School with the Oregon Mountain feeder pattern.
Hi, I'm Wendy Burke. I am a parent from Central Elementary.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lopez. I'm at Las Cruces High School.
Elena Martinez, a parent at University of Elementary.
Brendan Griffith, White Sands School, parent.
David Lora, teacher at Oregon Mountain High School.
Julie Whitecoat, representing NEA Las Cruces.
Karen Hansen Sharp from Mayfield and representing NEA.
Sergio Marquez, Lynn Middle School teacher.
Teacher of the year.
We have a Teacher of the Year and our Principal of the Year with us this evening. So thank you very much for those introductions. And do you mind just real quickly?
My name is Felicia. I'm with the Early Childhood Education.
Thank you so much. One more?
My name is Marissa, and I'm a parent at Horizon.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, on the screen, you'll see our agenda for this evening. So I'm going to be going over our goals, timelines, and responsibilities. Then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Martinez, and then she'll be going over a rezoning process and the data. And then we're going to have Dr. Miller Tomlinson work with us on our open enrollment and transfer policy, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So goals of redistricting. First of all, we definitely want to balance our numbers. So our 4 comprehensive high schools, we do have some issues with our numbers being a little bit out of balance, especially with one of our high schools at Mayfield. So we definitely want to look at that and bring these numbers back into alignment. As far as our elementary numbers, we had to prepare zone changes prior to building Columbia Elementary. So Ms. Martinez, her team, she and her team are at this point reconfirming those numbers. So some of that work had been done previously, and now they're going back to double check those numbers. We will be looking at demographic shifts across the district and delving into the increase of our students in our East Mesa schools. So the roles of the Redistricting Advisory Committee. So we definitely all serve in an advisory capacity. Our job is to come up with options for the board to consider. We'll use the information from Ms. Martinez in addition to the feedback from you all and our families to determine the options for the board to consider. This is the makeup of the Redistricting Advisory Committee. So we definitely, as Mr. Reese said, want to give a shout out to our students that have joined us this evening. I think it's a great lesson in civics for them to be a part of this process. So we are looking forward to their feedback as well. Redistricting Advisory Committee dates. So when we initially put this committee together, we had 3 dates on our calendar. And I think you'll notice here that we have one more date. So we, as Colleen and I have been talking and working very closely together on this process, we've come to the conclusion that we really do need to add one more meeting date that we did not give you ahead of time. So if all of you will please check your calendars for this November 13th date and put it in for us. And if you know right off the bat you have an issue with that date, if you'll see me immediately after this, we'll talk about it. okay? But for now, our tentative fourth meeting date for this committee is November 13th. We also have 2 feeder pattern meetings scheduled for November. November 6th and November 7th, and we're planning on meeting with 2 feeder patterns each evening to get feedback from our families at that time. So make sure, we'll let you know exactly which schools are going to be on which nights because you'll want to come with your group. We'll get you that information as we get a little bit closer. All right, board responsibility. So New Mexico statute states that the Board of Education shall define school district boundary and boundaries of attendance for each school. So as I said earlier, our job is to come up with options for the board to consider. It is ultimately a board decision, okay? Feeder pattern meetings. Oh, sorry, hold on. I already said that. All right, timeline. This is our timeline for the fall, and we also have a timeline for the spring. So this fall period is the time when we are doing the work with the committee. We are evaluating the data, getting feedback from our stakeholders, analyzing that feedback, and then preparing our options for the board. So tentatively, our board has a meeting November 8th, which is a board retreat or an extended work session. And so that is a time when we'll be able to give them some preliminary information, but we will not have had our feedback, or we will have just, will not have had our feedback meetings from the, hold on one second. Yep, we will have just had our feeder pattern meetings, but we will not have had a chance to bring that data back to you. And before we bring full options to the board, we want to make sure that this committee has a chance to review that feedback. So that's why we are saying that the 8th for the board will be a time when we'll start giving them some preliminary information. But on November 19th, I can't see, need to put my glasses on. On November 19th, that's when we'll formally be preparing sharing the options that we prepared for the board. At that time, they'll be able to discuss with us and potentially vote. But we may need to bump their vote until December. They may come back and want us to do a little more information gathering, looking at data, looking at other possible options. And so we do have one board meeting in December, and at that time we hope that's when, if they haven't already made a decision, that at the December 17th board meeting, that's when we will get possibly approval by the board. So January to June is when we'll be rolling out the decision. So we will start working very closely with our communications team, with Ms. Jameson, on rolling the information out to the community so parents and families, students, everybody knows what the new boundaries look like and what those changes will entail. We'll be giving an update to the board in February so they know how the process is going. And then we'll be having school transition activities February to June. In May, we'll be updating the board again on how the process is going. And then the school year for July, that starts July 2025, is when the new boundaries go officially into effect. So the work that we're doing is for the 25-26 school year, which coincides with the opening of Columbia Elementary. All right, so let's talk for just a minute about communication and stakeholder engagement. We've already had 2 press releases that have gone out. You may have seen those, and all of this information will go on our redistricting page on our website. Ms. Jameson has a lot of communication channels that she uses. We've got our website. She'll be doing more press releases along the way. She goes to our radio stations a couple times a week. She'll be sharing information there. We'll be asking TV if they're interested in hearing about what's going on. We also have our social media platforms. We have push notifications through our LCPS app, direct email to staff and parents, and then flyers. So again, I want to reiterate our stakeholder feedback through this process is through this committee. We will be doing a thought exchange survey sometime in October, early November, and then through our feeder pattern meetings that I mentioned earlier. And then we also have a public input portal where people can email us and give us feedback, and that's the input@lcps.net. So at this time, I want to say that Colleen's piece in this is really being a consultant and facilitator for us. She is the expert in this field. She's going to work with us on our enrollment and boundary study, our utilization and capacity study, of course, the current trends and demographics, and then ultimately getting us our options together for the board. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
I just have to switch computers.
You got it.
You want this one out? That should be. Let's hope this does a quick plug and play. Let's see here. It worked first time. Gotta love it. Technology. Let me grab my mouse because once we get towards the end, I need to be able to actually drive versus a touchpad. So tonight what we're going to talk about a little bit is a little bit more about your committee role, which is a little bit more in depth than what Ms. O'Brien talked about, the rationale for the rezoning, some of the demographic shifts that have happened in Las Cruces within the district, the impact of new housing. There's been a lot of housing construction in Las Cruces, especially within the past 6-7 years. Changes in enrollment, some of the student transfers and capacities. Our next meeting, we're going to talk a little bit more about the elementary schools. We'll dive in a little bit more deeper on that. And then we're going to build as those transition up into middle school and high school. So committee role, evaluating the options, providing feedback, keeping the public informed of the process, the local community. Consider that public input and suggestions via the feeder pattern meetings and also whatever comes back from the thought exchange. And then review the finalized options for presentation to the school board and to the superintendent for final consideration. Those are all important key aspects of your job here. And then let's talk about a little bit of the rationale. One of the big things is that the last time this was done for Las Cruces Public Schools was when Centennial was open. So it's been about 12 years, almost 13 years, since this has been done. And when that was done at that time, there were changes, some to the middle schools, some to the high schools drastically to incorporate Centennial in. But a lot of the elementary schools didn't really get massaged around a whole lot. Some were, some weren't. So looking at the rationale this time, we have a new elementary school that got replaced, Columbia Elementary. It's under construction now, be opening up next year for the 25-26 school year. We also have another school that the district has major addition and expansion going on at Desert Hills. That has also been designed and set up to help deal with some of the growth in the Sonoma area. And that has kindergarten addition and some special ed classrooms. Both of these projects were completed through local funding from GeoBond and along with state funding assistance from the Public School Facility Authority. So the district has been able to leverage state assistance and being able to expand some of its capacity in some high growth areas as projects were eligible. So the new school for Columbia is going to be for 764 students. We know that Columbia is sitting all by itself now over at Centennial High School. They're going to finally get to go back home next year. And it's been a long fought, hard process. I was part of the process at the beginning to help with the state and the district to kind of get it through. So it's finally coming home, and just seeing that building come out of the ground makes me happy. And as part of that process, just as a little bit of background, one of the things that was required was that the district had to show how it was going to shift enrollment. So we had prepared some adjustments between Columbia, Highland, Monte Vista, and some of those areas in the high growth areas of how those zones were going to be able to accommodate some of those students. And we'll see that at our next meeting. So looking at balancing enrollment among school levels that are experiencing high numbers of housing developments, we've been tracking housing developments in Las Cruces per attendance zone based on the elementary level, which then goes up through the feeder patterns since 2019. So we know what's been built, major housing developments. If it's a one house here or there, we can't really track. But major housing developments of 20 units or more across the city, we've been tracking it for close to 6 years now. And so we know what's been built, where it's been built, how many have been built, how much it cost, and we know what's being built now. So we have all of that stuff, and we update this data regularly. I have somebody in my office that updates it every 3 months because everything's always a month behind whenever we get anything. So we want to make sure that it's worth it. One of the other rationales for this is that because we know new housing is coming, we also need to adjust for capacity. And so what we're looking at is some targeted elementary rezoning. But so it's only going to impact some schools. It's not going to impact every elementary school in the district. Realignment of middle school and high school feeder patterns to help maintain consistent enrollment. Because right now, if we start making some adjustments on those targeted elementaries, we kind of mess up what happens at the elementary level or at the middle school level, and then that also messes up the high school. And we also know with some of the growth that has happened on the East Mesa, we already have an imbalance on the high schools, and that's without even doing anything below that. We have to fix that. So if we're going to fix it, we're going to work bottom up on those targeted elementaries, adjust the middle schools where they need to be so that they've got the consistent feeder pattern into to the high schools, and adjust the high schools where they need to be. And I'll show some of that this evening of where that is. So looking at some of those objectives, we want to make sure we're efficient, effective use of school facilities, basically aligning where possible enrollments with the school capacities. This is something that's really critical for the district because it is very lucky in the fact that when it does need facilities replaced, renovated, or expanded, it does have the ability to get 48% right at the moment on the dollar for every 52 cents it puts in back from the state when projects are eligible. So if we think about Mayfield and think about other schools in the district that need funding for renovations, replacements, additions, whatever, one of the big things that has to happen is the district has to be able to prove that it is making efficient use of its facilities. So we don't have empty buildings here or partially empty buildings here. We want to make sure that we're looking at this holistically. We want to reduce overcrowding of campuses at high growth school sites. Plan for that future growth. It's not if, it's when. It's coming. Keeping neighborhoods and feeder schools tracking together whenever possible. Right now, while we have the 4 high schools and we have what are considered feeder patterns, there are a lot of split schools. There's elementary schools that split, there's middle schools that split, and we're going to look at, is there a potential where we can reduce that? But we also look at socioeconomics, we look at everything, we look at special education. When we look at, are those things possible? It's not just a number of kids. We dig down deep. Are there certain schools that have specialized special education programs that we need to be aware of, that we make sure that we preserve, or is there a potential that that program may need to move because there's better facilities over here versus here? So that's one of the things we look at. Minimize rezoning within neighborhoods whenever possible. We don't like to cut if we don't have to. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but we try to cut it like off of a main street. If you know, where you have things, or using natural features. And considering proximity to campuses, safe routes to schools, wherever, if you're going to have walkers, we take a look at that if that's possible. And that to me is where a lot of times feedback from the local community is really critical, because we can't go everywhere, every place within the whole city whenever we try to redo stuff. We had an instance earlier this summer. We had a great setup, but there was an arroyo that didn't show up on any map, and you couldn't see it on a satellite. But you couldn't get from this newly constructed neighborhood to the school site. You had to walk a whole mile plus off of a busy street to get there. But there's no way we could see that, but the local community gave us that awesome feedback. So those are the kinds of things, as we kind of show some of this stuff, that we're hoping that you're able to give us feedback on. Because those are things that you live in those neighborhoods, we don't. We spend a lot of time down here. I have family that's down in this area, but I can't be in every single neighborhood to see all the nuances of how you get to places. Transportation needs, not just of the district, but the parents. Because while we know the district provides transportation to students, there's a lot of parents that take their kids back and forth to school. We don't want to make that more difficult, but we also know that students drive when we get to the higher student populations on the high school. So when we're looking at how things split up, we don't want to increase that transportation. And it's beyond just actual transportation. We're looking at noise pollution. We're looking at air pollution as well when you have to drive from one side of town to the other. Allowing that community input, and then looking at the transfer policy, which we're going to begin to discuss tonight. And then, the district's going to provide the parents the updated zoning information and everything later this year. I do want to say that some of the data that we're going to go through tonight is going to be a lot. And I know I'm going to see half of everybody's eyes glaze over. I already know it because it's dry and it's a lot. But don't fear, because when we start talking about the elementaries, there's going to be some of this that's going to come right back, because I'm going to reuse some of this as a reminder when we meet back up again in October, because it helps me and it helps y'all. So looking at the local demographics, Las Cruces area, we have the ability that we can look at both Doña Ana County, City of Las Cruces, as well as the district as a whole. So since 2010, the population in Doña Ana County has increased about 7.4%. And the population within the school district boundary has almost been double that at 13.4%. It's increased. So right now, if you think about it, there's 3 school districts within Doña Ana County. You have Hatch, you have Las Cruces Public Schools, and you have Gadsden Independent Schools. So you share a population with 2 other school districts. You're sandwiched in between. When we look at population, one of the big things when we talk about school districts, we're looking at our under 18 population, because that is our student population. Back in 22, that's the most recent data. We're going to get 23 data hopefully in the next 2 months. From the U.S. Census, we had about 37,844 individuals under 18 who resided in the school district. Approximately 57.1 of those under 18 were enrolled within the school district in 22-23 school year. The rest of those, almost 33%, were enrolled at either Hatch or in Gadsden. We had about 2.7% that are at the charter schools within the school district area. And then we have about 7.3%. Those are the ones that just haven't been able to make it to school yet. They're just a little too young. So we're able to look at all of that information and kind of know. But one of the big things is since 2010 is within the school district, populations increased from 144,000 to 164,000 people. But we haven't had a massive increase in proportion to the under 18. And that's mainly because we just haven't had a lot of births within the state. And I'm going to go over some birth rates in a little bit, but families are just having fewer children. We might have a lot of people moving in. Some of the new housing communities, some of them are 55 plus. Las Cruces is kind of marketed in some ways, in some areas, as a retirement area. So you do have a little bit of an older population. So, you know, that is also mixed with New Mexico State, where we have a really big band of in those 20-year-olds, but nobody's having babies. So looking at some of those population trends, you can see, let's see if I can get my little thing here. Right in here, this is our under 18 here. This is the 18 to 64, and then our 64 plus. And so when we look at our generation breakdown, we look at, you know, between the older, greatest generation and baby boomers, we're about 25%. But one of the biggest groupings is the millennial and Gen Z. They make up about 49% of our population, and that's where some of our babies are going to be coming from, especially on Gen Z in the future. And that is a good thing. Some of those, again, are college students that some of them are here for a little while and aren't staying, but some of them are staying. Some of them, you know, will be here, and you can see that when you look at the age pyramid here, that 20 to 24, we know where those kids are coming from. Those are New Mexico State primarily. But you can see down here on the lower end, there's still just not a lot of kids at that younger age, under 18. You know, 66,000 households within Las Cruces School District. Housing affordability is at 94, meaning that an average family has 94% of the income it needs to be able to purchase a new home. A lot of people can, but a lot of people can't. If that number, the closer it gets to 100 or above, the better off socioeconomically most families are. Median household income is close to $57,000. And I have a little bit newer data from that from the Department of Workforce Solutions that I'll talk about. Looking at the diversity profile between Doña Ana County and the school district, highly Hispanic, 60% plus. This also tracks with the district schools. We've already started looking at that across the district. We're between 60 to 70% Hispanic across all school types. Heavily Spanish speakers in this area, and that is also indicated here as well. But everything tracks matching up. So we are able to cross-check everything and make sure that we don't have any strange anomalies. Looking at the economic development profile, healthcare is one of the biggest things, as well as educational services within the school district. And this is, you're looking at healthcare, all the hospitals, educational services, New Mexico State, Las Cruces schools, and others, retail, public admin. There's the breakdown between employment, 64.6% white collar, 14.6% blue collar, but there's a high service industry number of people working in that at 20.8%. So we have that as well as part of that. And then just looking at home ownership, high home ownership rates here. A lot of people in some of the older neighborhoods have owned their homes for a long time. And that's part of the driver with some of the new housing. People are able to move up. Looking at some of the household incomes, again in that 50 to 70% range. Total housing units, 72,169. This is going to be a couple years behind because it is census info. We have more current info on that as part of that. High number of people that have bachelor's and graduate degrees and associate's degrees within the community. So looking at unemployment rates, it is a little bit higher than the state as of July of this year. The state was at a 5.3% rate. The area within the school district was at a 5.8. So Doña Ana County, I apologize for that, was at 5.8. When I look at the average hourly wage in the Las Cruces Metro area, $23.60 an hour is the average wage, $944 a week, which is significantly less when I compare it to the rest of New Mexico, which is $28.98 versus almost $1,150 a week. Out of all the jobs right now, this is as of September 2nd, so this is pretty recent data. Within the Las Cruces areas, there's 3,483 jobs. And so supply and demand, we've got 1.28 candidates for every job that's available right now. So that's at a good number right there. So that's a good thing. It's top employers, mainly healthcare. You can see top. So, and then it starts again to the education. So that, even though that chart's a little bit older from the census, it does come back and line up with what's occurring in the community. Housing. So approximately 5,200 homes, single-family, multifamily units have been constructed over the past 6 years. This also includes some of those 55 and plus. Right now, there's 1,200 homes on the market at this time, with selling prices ranging between $129,000 to $1.7 million, depends on how fancy you want to get. The average selling price, though, is about $315,000. Currently, there's 21 new housing developments, including multifamily units that are in development, which will provide about another 2,500 additional units over the next 3 to 4 years, because some are currently actively building, some of them are in the preliminary planning stages. So it's going to take a while for them to get the rest of their funding to get out of the ground. Some of those include some of the new affordable housing units that the city has been working towards and contributed money to help as part of that. They're going to impact several attendance areas across the city. And so as we've been tracking them, and I'm going to show a map of this, we're going to be looking at how those impact those particular school zones. So you can see this little map here. We have primarily the Monte Vista area is impacted. We've got impacts to Highland. We have a little bit to Cesar Chavez and Sunrise Elementary, some to Sonoma. There's a little bit of housing left to be completed in the Jornada Elementary School Zone. There's new units for Hermosa Heights, Tamba, and Mesilla. So while there's a heavy concentration on the East Mesa, we're aware that they're occurring in other areas. And as we start moving through this and validating what the board had approved on the elementary for Columbia and some of those up on the East Mesa, we're looking at, is there going to be an impact based on current enrollment in some of these other areas as well, just to be sure. So those are kind of like all the big pieces on the outside of the box that are occurring within the community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about enrollment. I'm not going to get too deep into it because I'm going to save some of that as we go down for each specific area as we start working into particular options. The only school district that I have 24-25 data is Las Cruces. I got their 25-day count. Everybody else, I have 24-day count. Everything was going great until COVID struck 2020. Everybody knows this. One of the big things that happened for Las Cruces, every other school district within the state experienced enrollment declines. Not every school district within the state has been able to fully recover. Most have not. Las Cruces has not been able to. It's since the 2020-21 school year, enrollment has declined 7.5%. What's interesting is when I look at school districts that I see that have started to have declines, and it's a large district, and I see a lot of housing. I see a lot of things happening in the community. I'm like, what's going on here? So I start looking at enrollments around the district. And I start going, okay, is this just an isolated incident, or is this something larger? So what I started discovering is Hatch, down here in the green, from 2019 to 2021. Ever since then, they've been on the decline. They've declined 8.3% as of last year. We'll have their numbers later this year. Gadsden, again, they're at 13,182 in 2019-20, but as of last year, they were down to 12,000. Between 23 and 24, they lost 500 students. District, Las Cruces, lost close to 500 students. It's very interesting. There's a variety of reasons as to why, in terms of that. The district's charter schools, and I shouldn't say district, the charter schools within the district also were on a decline. However, there was a new charter school that opened in the 21-22 school year in the middle of COVID that has been adding grade levels annually, but they have a cap of only 700 students. Right now, they are serving grades 1st through 11th, so their increase in enrollment is slightly skewed. If I took them out of the mix, they would have also declined about an additional 4.1%. But it shows that they've increased because they've done that. But their increase in enrollment at 330 as of last year is not enough to justify where all those kids have gone. You know, there were a lot of families that moved away. There are families that went to homeschool, online school, all of that. Some that possibly even went to Texas because Texas wasn't shut down as long as we were. So there is a variety of reasons. And time is going to tell. Once we get to 40-day counts, some of those numbers may come up a little bit more for the district side. We typically like to work on the 40-day, but 25th day is pretty close. We're not going to see we're not going to see 500 kids between 25 and 40. And so I'm interested to see how these other districts have managed to with their enrollment as well. So just keeping that in mind. So we've had some changes across the district. Looking at birth rates, as I mentioned before, we are having fewer kids. Looking at the past 10 years, going back to 2010 and kind of correlating that to when kindergartners start. Back in 2010, 3,323 babies were born in Doña Ana County. Back in 2019, 2,631 babies were born, 700 and something less. As of 2022, it dropped down for 2 years, and then as of 2022, it's back up to 2,600. So, but it's still at that lower level. 20.8% decrease in births in Doña Ana County. That's a significant number of kids not being born that impacts that lower enrollment. The state of New Mexico has also had a significant decrease in births as well, 20+%. So that tracks, and many other counties across the state are experiencing the same thing. So it's not unique to Doña Ana County, it's statewide. My hope is that with the stabilization of the births in the past couple of years, and then potential new in-migration, especially with some of the new housing, this will have a positive impact, because even if you have migration, and even though families may have fewer children, if you have more families and if they only have one child, you will start to grow at a micro level. There is enough that will start to add up if you have more families, hopefully from 23 onward. And since we've been working with the district, we've been able to keep track of all of those things as well. And you can see overall enrollment decrease, the kinder levels here, and I tracked it again with the enrollment levels with Gadsden on their kindergarten and pre-K as well as Hatch. Again, I still went back and made sure that what was happening within Las Cruces was happening elsewhere. Just because they had an overall enrollment decline did not necessarily mean it was at that lower level. So I went back and verified that what was happening in Doña Ana County was happening to everybody as part of this. Looking at current enrollment district-wide, back in 2015-16, 24,462 students. As of this school year, 22,647. Decrease in enrollment, again, that's about 7.5%. Just in the past 5 years when that major drop has happened, it's about 4.8%. Elementary enrollment, that's where we know we had that decline in births. We've declined annually about 1.6%, totally about 13% plus. So when we decline on the elementary level, that does matriculate up and does start to impact middle school and high school. And so we're going to start seeing those trends in the future when we start looking at enrollment. The largest enrollment decline was between the 2019 and 2021 school year. Again, we all know it was because of COVID. Middle school enrollment has decreased because we don't have enough elementary kids to feed up. And then peak enrollment for the elementary schools was in 2016-17 when there was over 12,000 elementary students. And then the peak enrollment for middle school was in 2021, and peak enrollment was in the 22-23 school year for high school. And that's, just over the past 10 years of looking at where those numbers have come in at. While overall enrollment has declined across the district, not all schools in regard to enrollment are equal in regard to enrollment loss. So some schools did increase some while other schools decreased some, and that's just part of that population shift. So I do kind of want to make that clear, is that not everybody decreased equally. So because the district has so many elementary schools, I broke them down very similar to some of the feeder pattern areas, even though they're not 100% that directly. I really did it more based on the middle schools where they kind of feed into, because there's a lot of information, and I'm just kind of go through it. Over the past 10 years, and this is for just this grouping between Columbia, Doña Ana, Jornada, Highland, Cesar Chavez, Sunset, and Monte Vista, enrollment in this particular quadrant of the city, up in that north side, declined 13.1%. The biggest decline, even though it's an anomaly, was at Columbia, and that's because the school had to move. So we're going from where it was original home was over to where Centennial was, and over time, that was just too far. That just kind of showed that people just could not make that far distance. So students ended up going to Doña Ana, Jornada, or other places. So that's kind of an artificial decline, if you will, because they were displaced because the school had to be rebuilt. And so that's why you see Doña Ana increase some. And again, new housing developments in Highland, Monte Vista, and Cesar Chavez and Sunset, or Sunrise, that student population is projected to increase over the next 4 years because of some of that new housing and some of the additional population shifts that are going to occur. And one of the things that's really important to understand is Columbia was designed oversized because funding was available from the state as a moonshot to help shift population to give the space for those kids. So that's where Columbia comes into place here, because it was designed with that larger capacity, because we knew where all that growth was coming. Looking at the next grouping of elementary schools, we've got Desert Hills, Sonoma, Conley, Hermosa Heights, Hillrise, University Hills, and Valley View. These as a whole, on average, declined 15.6%. Desert Hills had 25% enrollment loss. Some of that was during some of its construction. Sonoma just micro declined a little bit, and that's part of lower birth rates. Conley, Hermosa Heights did as well. Hillrise, University Hills, and as well as Valley View. Valley View had a larger decrease. Desert Hills was expanded as money was available to assist with rezoning for Sonoma. So based on its proximity. So that is a school that was designed so that it can accommodate some of that enrollment on the north end. Looking at the next grouping of schools, these ones feed primarily into Picacho and Sierra. Overall average is a decline of 13%. We have Alameda, East Picacho, Fair Acres, MacArthur, Loma Heights, and BT Washington. These areas have actually been impacted by high in and out transfer rates and smaller families residing within some of those older neighborhoods. And unfortunately, if people just aren't having more kids or only having 1 or 2 kids, there's just not enough kids. As population shifts and more affordable housing options do become available, enrollment is expected to recover a little bit closer to pre-pandemic. One of the things that does happen with housing is as new housing becomes available, if older homeowners have a house in an older neighborhood, they tap that equity and they can use it to purchase a new home in one of the newer, nicer, fancier neighborhoods. Their home in the older neighborhood is usually typically at a lower cost, and that can oftentimes be used as a starter home for smaller families. So that is one of the ways that that does help with some families to be able to afford housing in some of these older neighborhoods. And then our last grouping primarily feed into Zia and White Sands. Again, these also have been impacted by high in and out transfer rates and other socioeconomic factors, but we do know we have new housing planned for Mesilla and Tamba. So these areas over the next 3 years, that's going to help enrollment recover over in that area. Probably not 100%, but it will help some. But we do have, looking at decline of enrollment at Central. We did have some at Mesilla. You can see it's very small. Mesilla Park, Tamba, and then White Sands had some increases as some of the things that have been changing out there at the base. And then looking at the middle schools, most of the enrollment has declined except at Mesa. And I did highlight some of these ones with the stars on it because these are all schools that have either new housing or other factors that are going to play into what some of the changes are going to be needed. And looking at Camino Real, we know that we have some high growth in that area. Mesa Middle School as well. And then Sierra, that is a magnet school. Even though it's a magnet school, there's a lot of in-transfers to that school. Overall enrollment has declined. Vista Middle School, that's going to have some changes as part of that because that's going to be part of some of the Columbia realignment as it goes up. White Sands Middle School, the overall middle school enrollment's changed, but the elementary has increased. So that's going to balance itself out. And then Zia Middle School. There are a few large elementary cohorts in place at the 3rd and 4th grade level that will start to matriculate out and will help some of that middle school enrollment over the next couple of years. But right behind it, I do have some smaller cohorts. So unless we have a lot of new blood move into the community, we do have some smaller cohorts behind it. And then looking at the high schools, enrollment in 3 of the district's 4 schools has increased. All 4 high schools have high in and out transfer rates, which impacts overall enrollment. Again, back in 2011, Mayfield attendance zone was reduced to help create Centennial. And one of the things that was taken away from it was one area that is a high density area, which is more urbanized versus the more rural area up on that northwest side. And it took a lot of population away from it to help create Centennial. And it's had a long-lasting impact on enrollment at Mayfield. The Organ Mount attendance zone has actually had the largest increase in enrollment, and primarily due to a lot of those new housing developments being up on that East Mesa up there. So looking at some of those change, Centennial's grown about 8.7%. Las Cruces High School's grown some at 5.4%. Organ Mountain, 36.7%. Some of these are due to transfers. Arrowhead Park has grown. Rio Grande Prep Institute has declined some, and the district's working on some solutions for that particular school. But as you look here, right here at Organ Mountain, it's increased annually. So this is where I talked about there is a disconnect in trying to really rework with some of these high schools. And as I start to talk a little bit about some of the transfers, those are some of the things that does have to kind of get a little bit under control. There are some extenuating circumstances and factors that go into all of these. And it won't be the first time we talk about transfers, because while Dr. Wendy will talk more about the policy and some of that stuff that needs to be worked out as part of it, and we're going to be talking about them more as we start looking at some of the options as that comes into play. So let's talk about a little bit of the feeder patterns. I don't have the whole district here. I have all the elementaries. And then in the blue, which you can see of them, you can see those are the middle schools. And then you can see how the red lines overlay on top of everything and how everything kind of gets all chopped up. And I'm going to activate the map towards the end here, because I'm going to have to toggle between PowerPoint and the mapping software, because otherwise you won't be able to see much of anything. So first off, let's talk about our feeder patterns, because feeder patterns are not all the same. One of the things we've been able to identify is that within the Mayfield area, we have 5,274 students. Of those, 1,410 are high school students. We've got 915 students that are middle school. Of those, 36% of Vista goes there, 81% of Picacho, and 6% of Sierra. That's how it really breaks down. And then when we look at elementary school students, and this is how they break down as they go to each school, we've got MacArthur, Fair Acres, East Picacho, Alameda, Jornada, Doña Ana, Columbia, and then Highland. But as you can see on the spokes of a wheel, and I actually, because I had such a hard time with this, actually created a whole circle with the 4 high schools in the middle. And then I kind of did the middle schools out, because it is very complicated, especially when you're working with the enrollments. And so that's where we were able to really look at how, when we're looking at enrollment from Alameda, 80% goes to Picacho. Highland, we have 36% that goes to Vista. And then once it moves from Vista to Mayfield, we only have 36%. And that school's way up on that north end. And that school should probably be more feeding into that school. And then again, we've got Picacho Middle School, 81%. And then we have Sierra down here. That gives 6% of its students that go there. Then we move over to Organ Mountain, kind of like going around clockwise around the city. I have 7,926 students that live in this area. 2,673 of them are high school students. I can guarantee the high school does not have enough capacity if all those students went to school there. Middle school students, I have 1,833 compared to half for Mayfield, which were 915 for the 2 schools there. Vista contributes 38%, Mesa's 100, Camino Real 83%, and White Sands 100%. And because White Sands is so small, it's not like a monstrous number like the other schools. And then those elementary feeders, I have 3,420 elementary students that feed up through that. Cesar Chavez and Sunrise, we've got 855 students combined in that area, because those 2 are sister schools. And I apologize if I haven't mentioned that, we have pre-K through 2nd and then 3rd through 5th and they're right side by side. Monte Vista at 100, Sonoma Ranch, Highland at 64%, Desert Hills at 100%, and White Sands Elementary. So if you start to see how they kind of come together, and so we have Vista Middle School that comes in, gives their little bit, and then Camino Real and such. Then we move over to Centennial. I have 6,008 students that live in that whole entire area. I have 1,716 students in the high school area. And I'm not saying these students attend there, but I'm just saying they live there. Total middle school students, 1,117. They're broken up between 4 middle schools: Vista, Lynn, Sierra, Camino Real. And then I have 3,175 elementary students, and they're all broken down between Alameda, Monte Vista, Central, BT Washington, Loma Heights, Hermosa Heights, Valley View, University Hills, Hillrise, and Conley. And so you can start to see one school, Hermosa Heights, splits between 2 middle schools. And then I have Central Elementary here that gives a portion, Alameda over here, and then I have 4 middle schools that actually feed into to Centennial. Granted that there are 2 schools that are on that smaller end, but I have 4 going in there. And then we look at the Las Cruces feeder, 3,980. Total number of high school students reside there, 1,591. Total middle school students, 999, and total elementary students, 1,390. Again, I have 4 middle schools that feed into this area. The primary one is Zia, but I do have a little bit from Lynn. I have some from Sierra and some from Picacho. And then I have 5 elementary schools that also feed in here. And 3 of those that are 100% and 2 of them that are at partial Central at 78% in Valley View. So what this does is it really shows where the imbalances are. It's pretty clear where the growth is, where the students are residing versus where the schools are located. And so you can start to see where things start to happen once you start getting to the middle school and to the high school, and things aren't quite working right. And each of the high schools has a limited amount of capacity, and each of those middle schools as well. So we're trying to see where we can make some of those adjustments as part of that. Does this help everybody to kind of see how these kind of go together? And these numbers are based on this year's enrollment. So these are active numbers right now. Also, I do want to mention all students are eligible to attend Mesilla Valley Leadership Academy for middle school, Rio Grande Prep Institute for high school, Arrowhead Early College for high school as well. But these are strictly on the feeder patterns. They're counted in these numbers, though. So just because you're on the, in that feeder pattern does not mean that you have to go there specifically to Las Cruces High or Oregon Mountain as part of that. So this is going to be a really hard chart to see. But one of the big things is that, and I summarized it here, and I'll try to show a little bit more. Based on assigned, when we look at elementary schools, we look at every attendance zone, basically in this column, and we were able to, what we call geocode students, and I'll show you, we're able to see where they actually go to school. So we know where they live within a specific zone, which is, I'll just pick on Alameda. No, don't mean it anything intentional. But if you have Alameda here, I know all the students that live in the Alameda zone by their ID and address. Then I know how many go to Alameda, how many go to every other school within the district, meaning that they're transferring out of their home school area to where they go. So for example, at Alameda, I have 367 students that live in that attendance zone, and only 256 actually attend the school. So I have about 30.2% of those students that transfer to other schools across the district. And then when I follow that column down here, when I go down here, it's every other school where they send kids, other zones where they come in. And so one of the things I do want to mention is that while you might see, and I picked on Mesilla Park because it had a high number, not all out transfers and in transfers are created equal. So for Mesilla Park, I'm able to follow, I have 323 students that live in that zone. I have 242 that go to school there, and 25.1% that actually transfer out. And then when I look at what, from all the other schools, how many kids transfer in, I have a in-transfer rate of 22.9. So it's like, oh, well, you're getting back what you're putting out very closely, but that's not equal. That distribution of what you're sending out, what that school zone's sending out, is not getting back equal. When you start looking at the schools where those kids are going from that particular attendance zone, one of the things I highlighted in that Mesilla Park area, 25 students go to Tombaugh. When you look at what comes back to them, they only get 10 students back from Tombaugh. That's not an equal reciprocation. And so when you start having those imbalances, then that starts impacting enrollment at all the other school zones when that starts to happen. When we look at elementary schools based on assigned attendance zones, each elementary school should retain between 83 to 85% of its enrollment. 7 schools have between 0 to 17%. So we've got 7 schools. 8 schools have transfer rates between 20.2 and 24.3%. Not too bad, not the greatest. So if we combine those together, we got 15. But we have 5 schools have out transfer rates of 25 to 29%. And then we have 3 schools that have out transfer rates that are 30.2 to 33.9%. And then I have 2 schools that have out transfer rates that exceed 45%. One of those 2 schools actually has an excuse, and that's Columbia Elementary, because of its displacement, and it had to allow students to transfer. So technically it's really only 1, but I had to still come back with my 25. So 9 schools have transfer rates that, account for that 30 to 38% of enrollment, out there. So that's pretty significant. And some of those, what we're hoping is through this process that we can maybe do that. And then as part of this as well, the district has the opportunity to look at programs. There's a lot of things that are going to be through this as well that will be able to occur. So I'm going to escape here for a second and hopefully switch over into my map, because I do want to show what the student distribution looks like. And unfortunately, the mapping software is a pretty big hog here. So we can see all of the, I don't know why it's not wanting to display. Maybe, is it, give me just a second here. Why didn't it go setting? I think I just got it. It was display thing. I think. It's thinking. Okay. Hopefully. Okay, there we go. There we go. You can see the whole district. One of the things that we were able to also do, so we have all of the elementary school zones here. When we zoom out, we can see across the district here. And we can zoom into a particular area. So for example, right here is Highland. I can show where the housing developments are here within these areas. And then I can show how the student distribution starts to look. And all the different colors are based upon where they live versus where they go to school. It can get messy really quickly. But we can look at some of these high growth areas where we know where this housing is being built. We can see where some of these developments are over in here in the Monte Vista area, and we can see where all the students are. And again, this is all based on this year's enrollment, and the different colors within each attendance zone are color-coded to where they actually attend school. So if they're transferring out, we can identify them pretty easily. We're able to also do this with middle school and high school. So I'm going to kind of come back over here since now it's working. And talk about the middle school a little bit. Again, with the middle schools, we have, based on assigned attendance areas, I think we're in the high schools, 85 to 87%, because mainly when middle schoolers are there, they're getting ready to track up into their next high school. So you tend to have kids that are staying put in order to do that. So we have half the middle schools that have between 16.4 to 29% that are transferring out, but a lot of that is due to the magnet program at Sierra. But then if they're at Sierra, then they come back out and, based on where their home attendance zone is, then they redistribute back out to the middle schools. So when we look at that, you can definitely see it, but there are some other larger transfer numbers that do occur beyond Sierra. So again, we're looking at that against the programs is before we start making a lot of major adjustments in those areas. And so I can switch back over to the map here and then turn on the middle school students. Where did it go? Where did it go? Can't find the layer. I didn't scroll quite all the way up. Here we go. So there's the middle schools. We can come back out. You can see here we do have some out-of-district kids that do come in. But again, you can see between where the housing developments are, you can see the cluster of students around all those areas. And so we know what the enrollment is, the capacity, 900 students, how much the enrollments are for each of those areas, and how those are all balanced. But you can see where the cluster of where students reside. And I think I'll show the high school one easily so that before I show you back to the data. And again, we see where all the heavy concentration of students are within the district here. And we can zoom anywhere into any area, and you can see within just even on a street, you have different colors here, so you can tell where there's groupings of students that go different areas. And at the high school level, you really want 85 to 90% of your students going to their assigned high school for a variety of reasons. The district has 4 comprehensive high schools, and they all have high out transfer rates and high in transfer rates. In the 20s. And while each school does have some students that do go to Arrowhead, majority of those students go to other high schools. For example, within Centennial, there's close to 200 students that go to Las Cruces High School. You know, and then there's a grouping that go to Mayfield and that go to Organ Mountain. And so those are some of the things we got to kind of take a look at a little bit deeper as to some of the reasonings why. One of the things that is the blessing right at the moment that has to be fixed is there's too many students for Organ Mountain than versus the number of students that actually reside there. So in some ways, this is working in the district's favor for this school year, but the hope is that with some of these changes that we can get this rebalanced, because we definitely have an issue here in terms of all of that. So just looking at those zones in bigger detail, you can see how Centennial's kind of crossed over to where Las Cruces High School was, over into Mayfield in this area. But one of the bigger things is looking at how large our Organ Mountain attendance zone is. It's pretty significant. So those are some areas that we're going to be having to take a look at as part of it. And then kind of looking at the next steps, I know Dr. Wendy's going to talk a little bit about the transfer and open enrollment policy. We're going to look at the refining of the elementary because we're going to build up and potentially look at developing additional elementary options and comparing those against available capacities, and then looking at potential comparisons of before and after socioeconomic status in some of those areas, as well as some special ed. So as we kind of move forward on each of those meeting dates, we're going to bring back some of this data that I kind of showed tonight, kind of like as a reminder, because even me, I can't remember everything. I know not everybody, it's a lot of information. So, but that's all I have now, and I don't know if, and then I'll turn over to Dr. Wendy, and then we'll take questions towards the end here.
And while Dr. Wendy is coming up, this presentation will be available. We'll post this on the website. I know it's kind of hard to see some of the charts and the graphs, so we'll be posting this so you'll have access to this as well. I know I saw somebody getting smart over your phones and zooming that in.
Even I can't see it.
Definitely, we are LCPS, right? But that'll be available for everyone.
Okay, perfect. All right. Colleen, you get to have the fun now. I'm gonna over here. Okay. So we're going to talk about open enrollment in 4 minutes or less. You're welcome. That's all right. You're fine. This cord is short. That's okay. So let's just talk a little bit about open enrollment, and it really starts from state statute. And just like with the boundaries, open enrollment starts with, and I can't see my computer because the cord's too short, so I'm gonna have to read off the screen. But so the statute asks local school boards to establish attendance boundaries within, so not only the boundaries of the school district, but the attendance boundaries within the school district as well. And it gives some priorities. So some of the priorities are obviously students that live in the attendance zone get first priority. Students that previously attended the school get second priority. And then it also outlines additional criteria that school boards may consider for their open enrollment policies. And so things like after-school care, child care for siblings, children of school employees, hardships, location, transportation, siblings attending the school, and student safety. And those are some of the things in the LCPS open enrollment policy that are captured. And I just wanted to, so Ms. Martinez talked a lot about numbers and statistics. One of the things that we have to remember is that each one of those numbers, each one of those dots represents a child, right? So we are talking about people. We're talking about families. And one of the things that our school board has captured in their policy is really that we need to, through the open enrollment policy, remember that we are dealing with children and we are dealing with families. So the board believes that transfers made available through the open enrollment should be accommodated to allow students and their parents a choice when selecting academic programs, interscholastic activities, or other factors that enhance the child's educational need. So really, not just looking at numbers, but also looking at each child and what that child needs to be successful, what that child needs to thrive. So just a couple of things about the board policy. It is based on, so transfer decisions are based on capacity. So there's two types of capacity. How big is the building? How many students can we fit in the building is one type of capacity. The other type of capacity is staff. Do we have enough staff to handle more teaching loads? There are statutes that limit class size and say how much of a teaching load a teacher can have overall, and then how much teaching load can students have per section. So those are the two types of capacity. Here, K-8 transfers are handled at the building level. So a student is requesting a transfer, a parent is requesting a transfer, that goes to the building principal. And the policy says if there is capacity, the transfer should be approved. So that keeps it equitable for students, that principals aren't saying, well, I like this student, but not that student, that if there is room, they take the student. 912
Transfers are handled centrally, and of course, NMAA rules apply. When students go from 8th grade to enter high school, they get what is called an open enrollment choice, and they can do that one time. So even if you live in Organ Mountain, you transfer to Centennial, that does not count against you in NMAA rules. Now, later on, if you've played and then you transfer, then there are certain sanctions, I'll call them sanctions, but there are certain rules that you have to sit out, you can't play varsity, you can only play sub-varsity, and so on and so forth. We won't get into a lot of that here. So some of the considerations, and these are important things to think about, is really transfer decisions or open enrollment decisions are really about equity and access. We don't necessarily have every program at every school. We have ROTC programs at 3 of our high schools, but Centennial currently doesn't have one. Sometimes students want to join the Army. They have a certain trajectory. They want that ROTC program is at Las Cruces High. So to have access to that, they might need to transfer there. So really ensuring that students have access and opportunity to programs. Student safety and well-being. A lot of parents do not want their children unsupervised, even high school students, and maybe especially high school students. So sometimes, they want, no offense, no, Zyla, no offense, just saying. I don't mean anyone in this room, but, sometimes parents want the students to go closer to family or closer to where they work, just so they know that their student is safe after school and has a safe place to go, that they have supervision. Removing barriers to attendance, again, even though bus transportation is available if you live within an attendance zone, sometimes there are barriers to attendance. Again, parents work out of town. They don't want to leave their children alone. So the kids aren't going to go to school if, they have to go with the parent to work out of town. I mean, there are a number of reasons why attendance becomes problematic for families. And again, we want to make sure that everyone has access to an education, no matter what their circumstances. And then finally, another consideration is enrollment and staffing and trying to keep balance. And as Ms. Martinez mentioned, in some cases, the transfers help us. At Organ Mountain, having some kids transfer out has kept the enrollment at that school more manageable. And so that's always a consideration when we look at numbers in the spring, is ensuring that that we do have some balance, that there's not too many students coming out, there's not too many students transferring to a specific school, and that we are appropriately staffed to handle those transfers. I can tell you I didn't put the trend data on the slide. There are typically, for the last 2 or 3 years, between 150 and 250 transfer requests during the window. When you look at and this is high school only, when you look at all the kids, that's not very many. It's a very small percentage that are asking for a transfer. Now that's through the process, through the window in the spring. And so that's just one of the things that we look at, and looking at the priority. If the child has a sibling already at the school, if their parent works at the school, safety concerns, unfortunately restraining orders, other kinds of situations that happen, we take all those things into account to make sure everyone's safe and comfortable at school and can get to school on a regular basis. So those are some of the extenuating circumstances. And that may have been more than 4 minutes, but that's my story on open enrollment. So I will turn it over to Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you, Dr. Wendy. So it is now 7:05, and I apologize. We have kept you over the time. As we mentioned earlier, this is live streamed. We will have the presentations put on the website so that you can go back and look at them. Who has a question related to the information we've given you this evening? Does anybody have a question? Will you just raise your hand? President Tenorio?
Close up, in addition to having it on the website, can she include sources?
Sure. Colleen, yes?
Sources are all under you. Okay.
Okay, yes, we can definitely do that. If you have a question and we didn't get to it, if you'll write it down, we will start off with that next time. Our next meeting, we're going to be focusing on elementary and looking at all of the demographics for elementary. We will be delving into some policy work, talking about the open enrollment and transfer policy, and also looking at the NMAA rules. So next time, it won't be you just sitting here listening to us. We're actually going to have you do some group work. So thank you again for your time. We look forward to seeing you on October 15th. If any of you have an issue with that extra November date, if you'll come see me so we can talk about it, I would appreciate it. So we'll see you on October 15th. Thank you.